And notice in verse 3, Pharaoh put the butler and the baker in custody. It says, note this, in the house of the captain of the guard. Do you remember who the captain of the guard is? Potiphar. Back in chapter 39, verse 1, Potiphar is the captain of the guard. So the butler and the baker were put in the royal prison in the custody of the captain of the guard, who is Potiphar. And then notice in verse 4, the captain of the guard, which is Potiphar, put Joseph in charge of the butler and the baker. Remember back in chapter 39 when Potiphar's wife accused Joseph, it says that Potiphar became angry, but I pointed out that it doesn't tell us with whom Potiphar became angry. Was he angry with Joseph? Or was he angry with his wife because he knew his wife was making a false accusation against Joseph? Potiphar was the chief executioner, but instead of putting Joseph to death, he put him into the royal prison. And here we see that Potiphar puts Joseph in charge of the butler and the baker, which demonstrates that Potiphar still trusted Joseph and his ability. So it appears that Potiphar knew the accusations against Joseph weren't really true. So he put the butler and the baker in Joseph's care, and it says that Joseph served them, and it says they were in custody for a while. Now watch what Joseph does in verse 5. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, they had a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them, and he saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" Now the word sad here, it means distraught. And so the butler and the baker were distraught because of their dreams. And Joseph noticed that the butler and the baker were sad, that they looked distraught, that they looked upset. And so here, listen. And so Joseph sought to minister to them. Now Joseph himself was dealing with some pretty intense emotions because of his own circumstances. In fact, if you look down in verse 14, Joseph says to the butler, who is going to be released and restored back to his position as butler, he says to him in verse 14, "But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away, I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into this dungeon." Joseph says, "Get me out of here." He says, I was kidnapped from my homeland and brought down here to Egypt, and I haven't done anything wrong. I'm innocent. You've got to get me out of here. Once you're back with Pharaoh, you've got to help me. Joseph was distraught too. There were things in his own life personally that were very distressing. Then over in chapter 41, if you look over in chapter 41, after Joseph rises to power in Egypt, spoiler alert, he's going to rise to power. He gets married. He has 2 children. And look what he names his 2 children. Chapter 41, verse 51. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, "For God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house." Then verse 52, "And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." Joseph toiled and he was afflicted by the circumstances of his life. And yet, when he saw that the butler and the baker were distraught, he sought to minister to them. He sought to minister to them. When we are suffering and we're going through a very emotionally intense time, we can easily become self-absorbed and focused on ourselves and our circumstances and how we feel. But instead of being self-absorbed, Joseph sought to minister to others. He wasn't so consumed with his own problems that he didn't see the needs of others. He's got a lot of things going on in his life. Hard things, difficult things, painful things, hurtful things. And yet, he still attempts to minister to others that he sees that need ministry, that are in trouble. The key, listen to me, give me your attention, please. The key to lifting yourself out of the pit of your problems and the pit of discouragement and self-pity is to minister to others. Minister to others. Get your eyes off of self and focus on others and look for ways to minister to others. If you stay focused on self, you will stay in the pit. And some people stay in that pit for years and decades, just focused on themselves and what has happened to them. You have to minister to others. And it can be as simple as looking for people around you who seem to be troubled or struggling and just asking, how are you doing? You look distraught today. Is everything okay? Can I help you in any way? That's what Joseph does. He asks, why do you look so sad today?